Hello, folks, and welcome once again to the Joel Saint Show. I am Joel Saint, your host, and I am a pastor, father of 9, and grandfather around 30. And I want to talk to you today 10 lessons we can learn from the recent Trump-Biden quote-unquote debate. So let's just get right into it today. Number one, media gatekeepers control not only what you think, the facts that they give you, but they actually give you they actually control the topics that you talk about. For example, remember East Palestine or Palestine, Ohio, the train that apparently spilled all kinds of toxic chemicals. I saw a couple of days ago that the National Transportation Safety Board has concluded that the burn-off was not necessary of all those chemicals. Well, have you heard anything about that? In other words, that event dominated the news cycle for close to a week. Now we don't hear anything about it. So be sure that we are being told not only what to think about the topics, but what topic we're going to talk about. And in this particular news cycle, now we're talking about the Trump-Biden debate. You know, if they didn't say anything about it at all, we probably wouldn't be saying anything about it. That's number one. The news media gatekeepers tell us not only what we're supposed to think, but they will decide or dominate what we're even talking about. Number two, this story actually began in 2020. Let's have a little bit of a reminder here. I'm talking about the story about what's happening here with Trump, Biden, and so forth. The Iowa caucuses. Joe Biden actually came in fourth in the Iowa caucuses, and this is what I want to point out here. The books are being cooked entirely. I'm going to give you an example. In that caucus, you may or may not remember, Pete Buttigieg actually won it by 26.2%. Bernie Sanders next at 26.1%. Elizabeth Warren, 18%. Joe Biden comes in fourth at 15.8%. Now, you would think that the ones who won the most votes actually were assigned the most delegates. You'd be wrong. Joe Biden, with 15% of the vote, actually 16% of the vote, gets 16 delegates. Bernie Sanders, with 26% of the vote, gets only 12 votes. Elizabeth Warren, she had 18% of the vote, gets only 5 delegates. Pete Buttigieg, who actually won 26.2%, nearly twice what Joe Biden got, he only gets 7 delegates. So the way it finally works out is Pete Buttigieg, who got twice as many votes, gets less than half as many delegates. So the books are cooked on these kinds of elections way back, and a lot of people will go back to, well, you know, what happened in 2020, Trump got robbed, whatever. You know what? The Democratic voters got robbed way back in 2016. In other words, we finally wound up with a president who got only 15% of the vote in the Iowa caucuses. 15% of the Democratic vote. That's who we wound up with. So that's the second thing. The books have been cooked for a long time. Number three, apparently the U.S. can run with no president whatsoever. We don't even need to point out anymore what a mess Joe Biden actually is. He walks around like he doesn't have a clue where he's going. It doesn't really matter. The U.S. can run with no president. If he could be up there on puppet strings, and it wouldn't make any difference at all. The deep state is running the country, and that's the question we really need to ask ourselves. If the deep state is running the country, does it really matter who is sitting in the White House? Because a competent Joe Biden or an incompetent Joe Biden, apparently neither one make any difference at all. And speaking of Joe Biden being out of it, why are we hearing about that now? He's been a mess ever since he got elected. I mean, let's face it, the man didn't even run. He did not even campaign, stayed basically out of sight, and then he wins the election. He didn't campaign because he didn't want to campaign. He was unable to campaign. It was too much for him. And now my YouTube feed is being all filled up with all kinds of examples of how incapable Joe Biden is. Walking around, saluting nobody, kind of wandering off. I don't know if you saw that in the G1 conference or what it was. Dude just kind of wanders off. And then the I think it was the Chancellor of Germany, walks out and kind of like brings them back. Come on back, Joe. Why are we hearing about it now? This has been going on for 4 years. I think I know why we're hearing about it now. Number 5, I have a prediction for you that has to do with what we just talked about, and that is the replacement talk will now begin in earnest. Last night's debate, I think, was the jump-off point. I think the reason why we had that debate was so that Democratic insiders and observers can now publicly talk about replacing Joe Biden. They had to demonstrate for everybody just how incapable he really is, and in the name of saving the party, and in the name of fair elections, and in the name of moving the country forward with the best possible candidates, it's time now to start talking about replacing Joe Biden. And that's really what last night's debate was all about. And not a real great prediction here, but I cannot believe that the Democrats will not replace Joe Biden with someone else. I don't have a clue who. Last night's debate was a jump off point. That's number 5. Number 6, and I've touched on this already. The last 4 years have definitely shown us that the deep state is definitely running things. Nobody believes that they're sitting around having policy decisions and Joe Biden sitting there in the Oval Office or in a conference room and his opinion is really important. Nobody believes that. There are other people running things. I read years ago that there's 2 types of people in American politics. The one type wants to see themselves on TV. They want to run for office. They want to wave to the crowds. They want to be cheered and so forth. So there's another group of people, though, that don't want to be seen, don't want to be known, but they want to run things. They're the people that are telling the people that we see what to do, how to do it, and so forth. I think the last 4 years have definitely demonstrated that. Number 7 here, neither candidate is definitely interested in the law of God at all. I don't even know if they're all that interested, frankly, in the Constitution of the United States of America. They're definitely not interested in the law of God. We must remember these things because we have been a country who has experienced the grace of God. How are we going to experience His grace? If we ignore His law, we won't be able to do that. And number 8, Jake Tapper, from the beginning. I mean, I had to laugh at this. What a mess we're in. He's talking about inflation, right? And he says to Joe Biden, he goes, I hope you caught this right in the beginning. He says, a basket of groceries that costs, when you began your administration back in 2020, costs $100, costs $120 now. Just a 20% increase in food prices. Jake, you obviously aren't doing any kind of food shopping at all. There's a young lady, her name is Amy Way to Save. That's what she goes by. I saw her on BuzzFeed, and she was talking about how the same amount of groceries in 2020, actually at the beginning, now this is in January of 2023, actually went up 40%. Now that's just a 2023. We're not even talking about the rest of 2023 to 2024. And yet Jake Tapper sits there, it cost $100 to $120. Jake Tapper's already shilling for the deep state here. It's a whole lot worse than 20%. As you know, who shop for groceries actually know. What a thing to try to get past people. And number 9, look no further than this particular clip. The Joe Biden incompetency clips are just out there everywhere. Well, look no further than this 40-second clip here.
If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our health care system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
And finally, then, both candidates are in favor of feticide. Now, I know the popular term for it now is abortion, but feticide is the proper name. The killing of the unborn. Both candidates are in favor. The only difference is how old do they get to be when they get to be destroyed, murdered inside the womb. Finally, as we wrap up, those are 10 points in 12 minutes, I trust. Actually, a little bit less than that. I want to ask a couple of questions about the law word of God. 3 questions. Question number 1. Has God given us his law, his public law, not just his private law, what we do in our own little corner of the world where no one can see us, but has he told us how to live publicly? Number 2, can we find that law anywhere? Can that law be known? If it cannot be known, then it's irrelevant. If it can be known, then why are we not doing all we can to identify it, live by it, obey it? And then third, number 3, I've hit on this earlier. Can we expect any kind of blessing? Can we expect prosperity? Can we expect happiness if we actively turn our back on the law word of God? If we actively insult him and tell him that we have a better idea, that our ideas, our codes, our laws are better than his. Well, thank you for being with us here on the Joel Saint Show. I trust to be back with you again very, very shortly. And I hope you will, like the psalmist, love the entire Word of God.